We're gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm going to introduce Michael-Angelo Zummo. He is the Global Director of CTI at Cyber 6 Skill. He is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who started his career as a Korean linguist and intelligence analyst, and he has served as at the NSA National Security Agency, where he supported national security efforts against foreign threats. Currently, Zummo assists enterprise organizations with their threat intelligence and threat hunting programs. How familiar are you with navigating in the shadows? Are you current with popular malicious tools on the dark web? Please welcome Michael Zummo.
Thank you. I've been talking all day, so I apologize if I take sips of water throughout this presentation, but thank you all for coming. I know you guys have multiple presentations to choose from. I am Zummo. As Marina mentioned, I'm the Global Director at CTI at Cyber 6 Skill. I see a lot of familiar faces from last year, so those of you that attended my presentation on threat hunting last year, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for supporting me again. Hope not to let you down this time either. But today we're going to talk about some tools of the underground. So last year, as I just mentioned, I came and provided some threat hunting training. Yesterday, we also provided some threat hunting training to people who signed up. And we talked a lot about how to manage your own personas in the dark web, how to find sources where threat actors are distributing data, selling data, sharing malicious tools, exploits, vulnerabilities, and things like that. And some of the most common threat types that we covered during those threat hunting exercises were initial access, phishing, supply chain compromise, valid accounts, fraud, vulnerabilities, you name it, right? We covered a lot of stuff. We focused a lot on the initial access, and the tools that we're going to show you today are related to that initial access part as well. And one of the most common questions that popped up last year was, we talked a lot about the threat actors, we talked a lot about the sources, talked about how to get access to the dark web, setting up a VM and stuff like that. One of the questions that came up was, well, what tools are they using? So this year, we want to analyze the underground. As you might remember, we call it the underground, not just the dark web. But we analyzed the underground for the most popular tools that threat actors are using, tried to understand the why. We tried to understand how they work, and then what do they do with it? Or alternatively, what can you do about it to protect yourselves from these tools that threat actors are using every single day? So we built a query similar to the threat hunting training last year, where we utilized a bunch of different key terms: leaks, cracking, hacking, logs, tools, phishing, credentials, brute force, you name it. There was more that we added to the list as well. And by the way, before I forget, my colleague Derek, who's not here, also helped out with this presentation and the research, and a lot of the tools were broken, so we had to kind of fix them. I give him all the credit for that. But once we built our query, we conducted our analysis in the underground. And just in a year's time frame, since the last time I was here at B-Sides Tampa, there was 324 million results from those sources that we collect from or that we analyze related to those key terms that we just showed up on the board. 88% of those came from messaging platforms like Telegram or Discord, which is, we talked about the different sites or sources that threat actors are usually engaging on: forums, marketplaces, and Telegram is one of those sources that's become very popular because of how easily accessible it is, and some threat actors are just lazy and they don't care about getting caught. So it's no surprise that 88% of the 324 million results here came from those Telegram channels, where they've dedicated channels to info stealers, dedicated channels for data leaks, ransomware, what you name it, you'll find it there. And then we had just 2% of them came from forums, but that gap is going to change once we dive into the specific tools here. So as I mentioned, our goal was to find these tools, mostly from my own curiosity, and to share it with you all, but then to understand, well, how do they work? Is it something that I can use myself, not being a developer or anything like that? And then determine what you can do about it. How can you fend off these tools? How can you prevent being a victim of these tools? And that's what we set out to learn. And what we found was there are a lot of tools out there. There's a ton. And there's no way anybody can cover them all. But there are some that are pretty common that I'm sure you're all familiar with. NJ-Rat is a rat that's probably been around for 2 decades, maybe longer or somewhere within then. It's a very common tool that you'll see across the underground. Threat actors using it, different variations or flavors of it you'll find. You'll find credential stuffing tools like OpenBullet. There's a bunch of different ones out there as well, and these are very easy to use. And then info stealers. How many people here have dealt with info stealers within the last year? Quite a few hands. Pretty common right now. And we're going to talk about one of those, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I just gave you a sneak peek. I shouldn't have done that. But we're going to talk about info stealers later on as well. But the first most common tool that we came across were credential stuffers. And in the past year, we saw over 449,000 results related to just credential stuffers alone. Of those results, 52% of them came from messaging platforms, so the Telegrams again, Discord, more so in Telegram, not as much on Discord, but there were some there. And then 45% came from dark web forums or deep web forums or even clear web forums. So that gap closed significantly there when we talk about credential stuffing tools alone. And on the left-hand side, bottom left-hand, you could see a Telegram channel that is dedicated to OpenBullet configs. So threat actors on this channel basically just share pre-made config files for an OpenBullet instance. You'll also see them selling them there as well. Some threat actors think they're difficult to build, so they'll sell them to threat actors, and they actually do make sales on those. And then on the bottom right-hand side, we have an example from a dark web forum where a threat actor was advertising a release of Silverbullet, which is pretty much the same thing. It was just a different name. And it was a free version. But as you can see here, a lot of threat actors offer services nowadays. And once you download that tool, you can upgrade to a premium service where you get a whole support and everything like that. But the most common one, and for those that attended threat hunting last year, got a little sneak peek into this one. The most common credential stuffer tool that we came across was OpenBullet. Now, you can find OpenBullet too on GitHub. It's not very difficult to find. It's probably why it's so popular amongst threat actors. And on its GitHub page, it tells you that performing DDoS attacks or credential stuffing on sites is illegal, and don't do it. But that's exactly what this tool is used for, more often than not. And again, reminder, if you play with any of these tools after this talk, we're not going to become perpetrators and we're not going to become victims, right? So follow those rules that we talked about last year. If you weren't here, message me. I'll send you those rules later on. But when we talk about OpenBullet 2, just OpenBullet 2, not Silverbullet, not any other credential stuffing tools, in just the past year, there was over 144,000 results for OpenBullet 2 across the underground just in the last year. And now you can see 84% of those results came from dark web forums, and then another 15% from messaging platforms. So what this tells me is that for those OG hackers or threat actors that are just, dedicated to the forum life, this is the tool that they're using when it comes to credential stuffing and initial access. And one of the reasons, or some of the reasons why I think it's so popular, is that for people like me that don't like working in the terminal too much, it's got a pretty easy to use UI. It's very easy to install. You can just get it from GitHub. You don't have to worry about downloading it from some threat actor that's trying to trick you. We'll talk about that later. And it's extremely accessible. Additionally, everything that you need to operate that tool is available on the very same forums that they're sharing the tool. So here's an example, 1.2 million, a little over 1.2 million results of Telegram channels, forum posts, paste bins, you name it, where they're sharing config files. So these are basically just configurations of the tool, sending requests to a particular site to try and automate that credential stuffing. Channels like that, over 1.2 million results dedicated to just that for any credential stuffing tool, but certainly OpenBullet. Once you have a config, whether you build it or copy and paste it from a threat actor, you could buy one, you could just use one that they share publicly. You might have to fix it a little bit, but they're there. Once you have that, the only other thing you need is a combo list, which is just a username and password file where you can get any data leak. AT&T leak was made public the last 3 weeks or so, right? 70 million people, over 70 million people. You load that into OpenBullet, and now you can perform a credential stuffing attack against any target that you want. So AT&T is just one example, but there are tons, hundreds of thousands, millions of credentials that are uploaded every single day to the underground. Some of them are valid, some of them are not, some of them are complete garbage, but it doesn't matter to you. You just need credentials to load into this tool and then let it run by itself to see if you get any valid hits. So you can find these anywhere on the underground, and it doesn't take much time. You go to one source and you will find them. And then the last thing you need is a target, which you come up with yourself. And the tool runs on its own from that point. So to demonstrate this, Shumit, do you play the video, please? Sorry, did I catch you off guard there? We recorded ourselves using the tool, and I'll narrate over this. We have our Kali box here. I already have OpenBullet installed, but again, you just get it off of GitHub. It's very easy to install. We're going to run the tool real quickly here. And if you can't see this too well, I do have a video of this, so just message me afterwards. I could send it to you. But now we have our fancy UI here of OpenBullet 2. And the first thing we're going to do is load in a config. Now, again, I can get one myself from the underground, but just to show you how easy it is, we're going to build our own config ourselves, where we're just going to build an HTTP request to a site called DemoBlaze, which is just basically like an e-commerce site where you can test automation and stuff like that towards. So there's nothing malicious here, but we built a request to DemoBlaze. Next thing we need is our word list or our combo list, where again, we can get those from an underground anywhere we want. But I just made my own here where we have 3 usernames and passwords that I made up and just load it into a text file. We're gonna now take that file, load it into our tool, which you can see there, word list 1. And then we're gonna create a job. So now we're combining that word list with our config file. We're gonna hit play. And again, we're targeting DemoBlaze at this point. Because there was only 3 credentials in there, it worked pretty quick. So it would take longer if you had like thousands in there. But you can see we have 1 successful match, which was that test account followed by that random password here that I had at the end. And that's it. From there, you can try and log into the account, escalate your access, and try and traverse the network or the account any way you can from that point. Can you go back to the presentation, please? Awesome. And that's really it. That's as easy as the tool gets. So any threat actor, from script kiddies to the most sophisticated actors out there, can use this to get that initial access or to find valid accounts to then try and find a way into the network. This is a great starting point for them. So what can we do about it? I think like for everything pretty much when it comes to initial access is that the very first thing that you can implement is multi-factor authentication. Adding an additional layer to that login so that even if those accounts are compromised, you have an extra step there to try and protect that account before a threat actor is able to get access to it. When it comes to credential stuffing, because the threat actors are going to be targeting a specific site and performing multiple requests, sometimes thousands of requests, and which could potentially shut the site down. But because they're sending a ton of requests in a short amount of time, you can implement account lockouts and rate limiting so that if you see multiple attempts on a single account from suspicious indicators, then you could just suspend the account automatically. Or if you see lots of requests coming from the same IP or something like that, then you can just suspend it altogether. Password policies, enforcing stricter password policies. A lot of the leaks that we see, third-party leaks, where we see your employees that are using their work accounts to sign up for Netflix, LinkedIn, AT&T if they were in there for some reason. Their passwords that they're using should not be able to access your own network, right? One, they shouldn't be the same passwords, but by enforcing stricter password policies will help you ensure or protect those accounts even further, because a lot of those lists, those third-party leaks we see, you just won't be able to log into your account if you have those appropriate requirements. So enforcing those will help. And then also enforcing more frequent resets. Because even if an account is leaked out there, a threat actor gets their hands on a valid combination. If you have frequent resets, then by the time they're able to try and exploit that account, you might have already resetted it, and you've added that little buffer there for you to mitigate any attacks. Dark web credential monitoring, or just underground credential monitoring. If you have some sort of feed or way to consume these leaks proactively, will allow you to just take the appropriate steps, remediate these issues before a threat actor does try and attempt an attack like this or gets their hands on valid accounts. So we see this all the time. Even if the passwords that you're seeing for accounts are not valid, just knowing that your employees' emails are out there or your personal emails are out there will give you an advantage in trying to just reset passwords or change any sort of account information that you can to prevent a threat actor from getting access. Leads us into our next tool. I think on the previous talk we talked about phishing as well, or the most common types of tools in the kill chain. But phishing was, of no surprise, one of the most common tools that we observed in the underground amongst threat actors. I think most of you know what phishing is, so I'm not going to go ahead and read this definition for you. But to showcase how common phishing tools and services were, we built another query. This one was a little bit more specific. We didn't have to do too much filtering here to filter out the noise, but we basically looked for mentions of phishing, phish, scam, phishing as a service in different variations, and that also had template, kit, or service in the post. Without those extra key terms there, we had a bunch of noise, so we wanted to add some more parameters to try and find real good results. And just in the past year alone, over 549,000 results for phishing alone in the underground. 69% of those came from messaging platforms, Telegram. And then we saw about 13% from forums, 2% from markets, things like that. And some examples here, again, Telegram on the left-hand side. There are tons of Telegram channels for phishing and fraud alone. But you can see here we have a channel where it wasn't just one threat actor, there was multiple threat actors on there that were just offering their services for phishing. In this case, this threat actor was selling phishing kits for any site, any target that you want, they would build a phishing kit for you. In some cases, I saw them selling the service for as little as $50 to threat actors. And then on the right-hand side, there's no shortage of threat actors looking for pre-made phishing kits or phishing services as well. You can see in this case, this threat actor was looking for a Santander email template or phish. And they meant PM, not PN, for a private message. But what I didn't screenshot here is all the threat actors that replied to this post saying, hey, I got you, things like that, I'll PM you. So it's a very common tactic that you'll see by threat actors that are just too lazy to go find it themselves. They'll just say, hey, I'm looking for this. And then you'll have a bunch of threat actors that reply to them immediately. And then here's another example from a primarily Russian-speaking forum. You might be able to recognize this because it's both in English and Russian. So you might know what site that's coming from. It's exploit. But you can see this threat actor was selling crypto and crypto scam pages and phishing pages. Some of the ones they advertised were crypto.com, Uniswap, OpenSea. And then further down the replies, they actually they expanded beyond crypto and targeted just banks in general. So when it came to phishing tools, there was a pretty wide variety of tools that we could have used. A lot of them came from the threat actors themselves. And we wanted to save engaging with threat actors for a very specific tool, which will be coming up. So this case, we just went with the tool that was the most accessible, which was a tool called evil phishing, which is, again, available on GitHub. You can just go find this on GitHub, install it. It's kind of funny. Just shows, again, how lazy threat actors are, just like us, or like me, I should say, where all the documentation says evil fish, but the tool, when you download it, is called evil phishing. It's just something that stood out to me. And in this example, we decided to just target ourselves, Cyber6Skill, where we have a user portal.cyber6skill.com. And my colleague and I said, well, let's just build a phishing page for a site that all of our consumers or all of our users go to and see if we could trick ourselves into using a phish. And that's exactly what we did. And to do so, there wasn't a good way to record this one. So we just took snapshots of the steps here. But basically, once you install the tool from GitHub, you need to save a copy of the HTML for the site that you're targeting. In this case, we targeted our site, portal.cyber6skill.com. And then once we saved the copy of our HTML, we ran a command in the terminal for evil phishing, which was the /new page, which created a copy of that HTML, and then we had to save it in this web pages folder that comes with the tool. From there, we have to run the evil phish command to actually execute the tool, which will then, and in this case, we ran it locally. We didn't want to actually host this on the internet or anything like that. Then our company would find out that we were doing this. So we didn't do that. But we ran it locally. And you can see that the tool is now running on the bottom. Attack is running. Just wait for victims to connect. So we took a look at our scan page, and we didn't update the HTML or CSS, but you could see it did a pretty good job at just making a copy just by the commands that it gives you. And for people like us, we might log into our own page, a page that you log into every single day, and you're like, why does this look broken? But for the unsuspecting victim, the people that aren't educated in this and every day, they might not think of anything of this and just still enter in their credentials like they would any other day. And in this case, if I put test in the credentials field here, you can see the tool will immediately inform me that somebody put their credentials in, and then I could take those and then try and log into their account on the real site. And that's it. That's exactly how the tool runs. So again, ideally, or in a realistic situation, a threat actor is going to host a phishing site, whether it's a typo squad or something like that. They're going to redirect users to that site, get their credentials, steal them that way. We did it locally. But what can you do about phishing? I think a lot of organizations do this really well. There's a credit union out in Texas that we are very close with, that they have a fantastic phishing program where they actually phish their employees every single week, which it would sound like it's traumatizing for them, but the employees actually like it because they have giveaways when they do a good job. But all they do is training and awareness, informing your employees about these types of threats and giving them the resources and knowledge that they need to identify these threats when they happen. I think for us, every time we hire new employees, like a few days after they start working, a week after they start working, they get a text message from our CEO asking for gift cards. And it's like, for us, again, this is obvious. So okay, it's not our CEO. They wouldn't ask me for gift cards. I hope not. I hope they wouldn't ask you for that. But that is a scam that apparently works because threat actors keep using it. And then you factor in AI, like in the previous talk, and all the different models that are coming out, makes it even more difficult to identify. But through training, through effective training, I think you can put up a good defense against these type of attacks. So always verify your senders of emails and use filters when possible. There's plenty of tools that will help you try and filter out as much of these phishing scams as possible. Again, enable two-factor authentication for just that extra layer of protection. Implementing typo squatting and domain monitoring. So monitoring for any registered lookalikes, domains that are trying to trick your users. I know for a lot of organizations, especially in the financial sector, it could be very difficult, and you would have to rely on your consumers to report these scam pages or these emails for you. But having some sort of methodology in place so that you can receive those reports to identify these and then take those sites down or block them from your network will be integral in preventing these types of attacks. And then, of course, just like we showed on the previous slides, monitoring the underground for any threat actors that are specifically targeting you, your enterprise, your organization, that are selling services to build phishing kits targeting your organization, or to monitor for threat actors that are, like in the Santander case, that are requesting phishing kits for your pages to try and trick your employees or your consumers into giving up their credentials. And then we have our last one, stealer malware, info stealers. Again, a lot of you raised your hands. These are things that you've been dealing with over the last year, but probably over the last 2 or 3 years is when they've started to really pick up their momentum. And stealer malware are just malicious software, typically distributed through spam emails, malicious websites, and software downloads. And there are a ton of different flavors nowadays for stealer malware. We have examples like the Vidar stealer, Luma stealer, which is very popular right now, and Redline stealer, which is the one we talked about last year in the threat hunting, where I showed you guys one that I actually purchased an account, compromised the Redline stealer, and showed you what the output looks like once you purchase one of those. And you can see this one's got a dedicated Telegram channel for support. They all pretty much do. But those are just 3 of the ones. And then we also have stealers like Azerol, Raccoon stealer, and there are many, many more. And to see how common these threats are these days, we really only had to look at one site. We can look at all the sites, but to show their significance, there's one site that we need to show, which is Russian Market. Who's familiar with Russian Market? See lots of hands. This site is dedicated for vendors, threat actors that are using any type of info stealer to compromise accounts, and then they can sell them on this marketplace on the dark web. I think they do have a clear web link too, but and just to show the significance, just in the past year, from January 1 to January 24, there was over 7 million compromised endpoints listed for sale on Russian Market alone. That's just one source. And there are a ton of sources where you can find compromised accounts that were captured by info stealers. And again, some of the top ones we observed on this site were Raccoon, Vidar, and Redline, and Luma. As you can see, 100% of these came from Russian Market. Now, we observe the publication of compromised accounts from info stealers or stealer logs across all these different sources. And just a small little snapshot, this wasn't a year's time frame, this was just like a month from other sources. You can see 19,000 results from sources like Telegram, dark web forums, other marketplaces, even on pay sites where threat actors are just uploading logs for free. You can see some of the examples here, like free logs from the Telegram group in the middle there. Then we can see some for sale down here at the bottom. Threat actors often try and boost their reputation because they're not going to sell anything without any trust amongst other threat actors. So they'll just distribute these for free across the underground. And these are things that we can collect and analyze to try and understand, like, are any of our users compromised? Are any of our employees compromised that we need to know about? So you'll find stealer logs and info stealers pretty much anywhere on the underground, but most definitely on marketplaces. So we tried to look for one, that we could crack ourselves or try and utilize ourselves to show how it works. And it's pretty simple. And the one that we came across was the Vidar stealer. This is an older version of Vidar. It was all in Russian. And finding this stealer was kind of a pain because what we found, did I skip ahead here? What we found is that, of no surprise, there's a lot of scammers amongst threat actors. They got no shame. They don't care. They're going to trick you. And one of those scammers that we came across was this threat actor, Adric Adi. And you can see this threat actor is pretty active. We have their Discord handle here. We have a number, their ICQ address, their accounts on Fraudster Crew, Cracking Mafia, Dold BB. Those are just to name a few. And every time my colleague and I, Derek, thought we found a tool, like in this case, Crypto Clipper. We downloaded a tool. It was a virus. It wasn't an actual tool. It was from Adric ID. Next tool we found, Anarchy Panel Rat, as you can see on the bottom. Adric ID, another scam. And then again, Nimrod Stealer, which was a stealer I hadn't heard of. I'm like, is this even real? We downloaded it. It wasn't real. It was a scam. And it was Adric ID again. There's my timer. This is how I keep pace. So this guy, by the way, these were multiple sources that we got these program or these scams from, and every time it was Adric ID. Again, one of my rules when we talked about last year for threat hunting was building a VM using something like a Tails or setting up a dirty machine so that if you do happen to install a scam or a virus like I did, you're not at any risk, right? So make sure, again, we're not going to be a perpetrator. You're not going to be a victim if you try to do this on your own. But finally, we found a cracked version of the Vidar stealer, also known as anti-Vidar, according to the documentation. And we got it from this Hack Pack 2022. Back in August, we downloaded this, which contained actually a bunch of different tools. There was a bunch of different files with all these types of different clippers and credential stuffers, a bunch of different tools that were available in it, one of which was that Vidar stealer. And the funny thing about it was, once we got through the files, we were trying to figure out what was wrong with the tool because it wasn't working correctly. So we went back and investigated, and it was Adric ID again. He actually stole all these files from somebody else and then just republished it and called it the Hack Pack. Because once we dug into the tool, we found the original author, which you'll see here in a second. So this guy just tried to take credit from somebody else. And we probably installed another virus, but we didn't check this time. And in this case, again, the tool was a little broken, so we had to play around. And I do want to mention that because we did this on our own, we had to create a local Apache server, open up the ports. We then created a MySQL database in the back end. And then we had to create the actual Vidar stealer executable, the malware itself, to infect victims with. So once we had our admin panel set up, we then had to link that admin panel to our Vidar stealer. And this is where we learned of the actual author, which was Vidar cracked by Scales 007. So once we linked it to our admin panel that we created, we got this nice little confirmation, file create. And then we had it. We had our malware. And then from this point, instead of, we thought about maybe infecting one of our employees and then saying hey, you got compromised, but we didn't do that. That was unethical. We instead infected another machine that we set up for ourselves, where we put, if some of you might recognize the pitiful address here, which is me, is one of my personas. We infected that machine where we saved our Proton credentials in the browser. And once the Vidar stealer detected those credentials, it reported back to us on the admin panel like you see here, where it gave us a glimpse of the user information, and then it provided the full log file here to download to get all the other accounts that were compromised. And that's pretty much it. That's exactly how the tool worked. And once they're compromised, Typically, the threat actors don't even use them themselves. They instead sell it on marketplaces like Russian Market. And this is an example of a Vidar Stealer post by the threat actor on Russian Market back in, was that November, where somebody in Florida was compromised by the Vidar Stealer, and both their Facebook and Google accounts were listed for sale for just $10. And we see this every single day. Myself and one of my colleagues here that's in the back of the room somewhere. Also, we purchase these for our users all the time to try and get their employee emails and their consumers off this market to prevent them from getting compromised. And so one thing I want to note before I go over what you can do about it is, again, we took the tool ourselves. We found a cracked version. So it is an outdated version, but we got it to work. We infected ourselves with it to test the outcome. But in most cases, we saw if a threat actor wanted to utilize any of these stealers, the threat actors that create them usually offer them as a service. So you can go to a Telegram channel like Redline, for example. You pay $100 a month, and then they help you onboard their stealer for whatever attacks that you want to perform, and then they manage everything for you. They basically just send you the log files once you've compromised some of those accounts. So a lot of the process that we went through is a little bit challenging for me. Give a lot of credit for my colleague. But if you're a threat actor that is not as sophisticated, or you're a script kiddie, you can literally just pay $100 a month for any of these other stealers, Luma, Redline, and then the threat actors that publish those stealers will just run it for you, basically. And then the logs are yours to use however you wish. But what can we do about it? Again, we're going to educate your employees. I already went over that, so I'm not going to beat that horse to death, but educate your employees, making sure that they're not clicking on malicious links or suspicious links. We analyze a lot of these compromised accounts on these marketplaces. And there's a trend of the types of sites associated with the accounts that are compromised. We see their Facebooks, we see their Instagram accounts that are compromised, but those aren't ones that we're really worried about. It's the pornographic sites that show up on these accounts as well. The suspicious gaming cheat sites, like places where not threat actors, but users will go to get cheats for whatever game they're playing. Those are probably the sites that they're downloading these malware and infecting themselves. So being able to identify those, analyze those, and use that to block your users from accessing from their work devices will definitely help you mitigate as much of these attacks as possible. But also install an antivirus to help detect any infections. Consume indicator feeds. I have on the next page here some examples of indicators just for the Vidar Stealer alone. So there are a bunch of feeds that will report indicators related to any of these stealers that you can use to proactively block these threats, whether they're the links that are being shared to trick users into installing it, or IPs, or any of the sites that are known to be passing these malware on to victims. You can use that information to block from your network so that your users can't, accidentally click on these or intentionally click on these if they are. And that's it. But to sum it up before I open it up for questions, again, my goal here was to show you some of these tools that are accessed by threat actors every single day. You saw how common they were amongst those threat actors across the underground, and just how easy they are to use, and how much damage they can perform with these tools. So I hope you learned something from this presentation, and you could take that back to your organizations or your personal lives to better protect yourselves from being impacted by one of these tools yourself. So thank you.